Hello, my name is Isaac, and this is the Casual Pokedex. On this channel, I'm working through a long-term project to systematically test which Pokemon are actually good in a casual playthrough. In my first video, I explained the full methodology behind these tests, but the short version is this. I semi-randomly generate a team of Pokemon that can theoretically cover every type. Then I complete a full playthrough of a game where that team is available and evaluate how each Pokemon performs over the course of the run. Going into this run, my team consisted of Ninetails, Slowbro, Tangrowth, Hitmonchan, Mamoswine, and Umbreon. My pre-run expectations were fairly straightforward. I expected Ninetails and Slowbro to land in A tier thanks to early access and strong typing in Ninetails' case, and bulk in typing for Slowbro. Umbreon I also expected to be A tier because of its durability. Tangrowth, Hitmonchan, and Mamoswine I expected to fall into B tier, because even though they have good stats, they arrive quite late. For my starter, I chose Chikorita, the worst designed starter of all time, since Grass would be the last permanent type added to the team, making it a good temporary substitute. What makes this run interesting is that half these Pokemon are available early and expected to carry, while the other half don't show up until late Johto. So this experiment isn't just about how strong each Pokemon is, it's about whether they're strong when it really matters. Because a Pokemon can be amazing, but if it shows up after most of the game is already over, that matters. After several hours, I finally made it to Slowpoke Well and caught a Slowpoke, who I named Numb. I trained her up and used her to take on Proton. The fight wasn't completely smooth. His Zubat landed multiple leech lives before going down, and his coughing used Smokescreen to slow things down. Water Gun wasn't doing as much damage as I'd hoped, and Numb ended up getting poisoned and worn down to about half health. Still, after a few more Water Guns, Proton was defeated and Slowpoke Well was cleared. While grinding before Bugsy, who Numb did not participate against, I actually encountered a full odds shiny Zubat. Unfortunately, since it wouldn't fit into the experiment and would require extra grinding, its most efficient use ended up being turned into experience for Numb. Bugsy himself was handled entirely by substitutes. Against Silver, my substitute Rattata took care of his Ghastly, and when he sent out his Quilava, I switched to Numb. Water Gun did less than I was hoping for, and Smokescreen made things inconsistent. After a few turns, Quilava went down and I stayed in against his Zubat. That turned out to be risky. Confusion missed multiple times and Numb took repeated damage, dropping to under half health. Eventually, both Pokemon ended up in the red, but since Numb couldn't outspeed, I switched out to a substitute Flaffy to finish the fight. Going into Whitney, I was nervous. Her Miltank is infamous, and the only fighting move I had access to was Rock Smash. Before the fight, Numb learned Disable, which ended up being pretty useful. I led with the substitute Rattata, which managed to take down Clefairy after a bit of back and forth, including a Metronome Giga Drain. Then Miltank came out. I switched to Numb and immediately saw how dangerous this fight would be. Stomp was doing solid damage and repeatedly flinching, preventing me from using Disable. Numb was quickly brought down to just 3 HP, without being able to get a single move off. I switched to a substitute Geodude, who managed to tank rollout and hit back with multiple high-power magnitudes, bringing Miltank into the red. However, rollout eventually took Geodude out. At this point, things started to spiral. I misplayed, expecting rollout to continue, but Whitney used a super potion instead. My substitute Rattata was sacrificed to heal Numb. Flaffy came in next, mainly to spread paralysis through static. After multiple growls, Miltank's attack was reduced significantly, but it was still a dangerous fight. Flaffy eventually went down after weakening it. Finally, I brought Numb back in. This is where the fight turned. Between Disable, Paralysis, and eventually a Confusion from Confusion, Miltank was locked down. There were multiple full turns of Paralysis, self-damage, and prevented healing. Even after Whitney used his super potion, the combined status effects and attack drops eventually wore Milk Tank down. After a long and frustrating battle, we won. At the time, I was extremely frustrated, but looking back, Whitney's difficulty felt much more fair and engaging compared to some of the more artificial difficulty, like Steven in Omega Ruby. After Whitney, I caught a Vulpix, who I named Squared, and received the Eevee from Bill, who I named Sweat. I evolved Eevee into Umbreon at level 14 to get Pursuit, but quickly realized that Payback was the better option and taught that instead. In the Burn Tower, I led with Sweat against Silver's Ghastly. Even though it landed a mean look, Payback still one-shot it. I switched to Squared for his Magnemite, which went down in 2 embers, and then brought in Numb for his Zubat. After Confusion landed and caused confusion, Zubat ended up taking itself out. When he sent out Quilava, though, the fight dragged unnecessarily. Instead of attacking, he repeatedly used Smokescreen, which just extended the battle before he eventually went down. At this point, I want to address something about Johto's design. The level curve in this region is awful. The issue isn't difficulty, it's tedium. I was grounding on Route 43, right outside the 7th gym, and the highest level wild Pokemon there were around the same level as Bugsy's Ace from the 2nd gym. That means you're forced to spend a huge amount of time fighting under-leveled Pokemon just to keep up with the gym leaders. It doesn't make the game harder, it just makes it slower. And the worst part is that it directly affects how Pokemon perform. If a Pokemon needs levels to function properly, like all of them do, Johto actively works against it. Strong Pokemon feel weaker than they should, and average Pokemon feel borderline useless until you're willing to spend hours grinding. By the end of the test, I had 130 hours in the game. That is absurd. Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the worst games to come out post-physical special split. Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl might have very few improvements on the original Diamond and Pearl, but it did improve them with at the very least the Fairy-type edition. And modern Pokemon environments might look like a bunch of cardboard houses with stickers as windows, but at least they're playable without hours of grinding at a time. I understand that the developers wanted to preserve Kanto as a meaningful post-game. That shouldn't come at the cost of making Johto itself feel poorly scaled. While grinding, my substitute Golbat actually evolved into Crobat thanks to earlier friendship grinding for Sweat. I also evolved Squared into Ninetails at level 24 since Vulpix's move pool doesn't offer much after Flamethrower. After finally reaching Morty's level cap, I led with Sweat. Ghastly went down immediately to Payback, and then Morty sent out Gengar, who chose to use Mean Look instead of attacking. That gave Sweat a free one-shot. I let Numb handle the rest of the fight. Both Haunters went down cleanly, and the final Pokemon used Curse, cutting its own health and making it easier for Confusion to finish it off. Going into Chuck, I was a bit concerned. Numb still hadn't evolved and wouldn't for a little while, and Confusion isn't exactly a strong move. I opened by using Curse to boost defense, while Chuck set up Double Team. After one more turn of setup, I decided to attack before his double teams got out of hand. Confusion hit and did about half health, and both of his rock slides missed, allowing me to take his Primate out cleanly. Against Poliwrath, things slowed down. Body Slam barely did damage but paralyzed Numb, and Surf also wasn't very threatening. However, Paralysis prevented Numb from moving multiple times. Eventually, Confusion landed, but the damage wasn't enough to finish the fight before Poliwrath's healing kicked in. At that point, I switched to a substitute Crobat who cleaned up the battle. After some more grinding, this time near the Safari Zone, I reached Jasmine's level cap. And this fight was fairly straightforward. Squared completely swept her entire team without taking a single hit. I took out the red Gyarados for experience, because in Johto you take all the experience you can get, because none of it means anything, and followed Lance into the Team Rocket hideout, clearing Petrel and Ariana without much trouble. For price, I led with a substitute Meganium since I didn't have access to Tangela yet, even though it was just on one more route, but the Rage Candy Bar sales dude was annoying. Meganium handled Seal, a substitute Graveler took care of Dugong, and Squared defeated Piloswine, helped by the fact that it chose to set up Hail instead of using a ground-type move. I wasn't expecting the next silver fight, so I led with whatever I had been using to grind, which was a substitute Grobat. It handled his Golbat, and then Squared took out his Magnemite with Flamethrower. I sent in Numb, who had now evolved, to deal with his Haunter using a Zen Headbutt. Squared returned to handle Sneasel, and Numb finished Quilava with a Surf before it had the chance to stall with Smokescreen again. A substitute Graveler handled Proton, and started the fight against Ariana, since it was the only Pokemon under Archer's level cap. Against Archer, I led with Numb into his Houndour. I opened with Curse to boost defense, but Bite flinched me, delaying setup. After getting the boost off, I was finally able to get the battle started. Surf took down his Houndour, and then his Houndoom came in. Even after healing, Houndoom was hitting hard, but Numb was able to outlast it and take it down with Surf. His coughing tried to stall with Smokescreen, but at this point Numb had been dealing with accuracy drops from Silver all game, and Zen Headbutt landed to finish the fight. At this point I finally caught Tangela, named Tickle, and Swinub, named Sauna. While grinding for Claire and searching for heart scales, I ran into two more full odds shinies, a Shuckle and a Graveler. Both were, of course, converted into experience for Numb. Against Claire, I led with Tickle against Gyarados, opening with Growth since it didn't have any threatening moves. After taking some chip damage, two Ancient Powers were enough to take it out. I switched to Sauna for Dragonair, and after it missed a Fire Blast, Avalanche took it down instantly. Then came Kingdra. I stayed in with Sauna, expecting to survive a Hydro Pump. I did not survive a Hydro Pump. So I switched to Sweat, and for some reason, Kingdra started spamming Smokescreen. That didn't matter, Feint Attack can't miss. After tanking a few Hydro Pumps, Sweat chipped it down and secured the KO. After earning all 8 badges, I finally obtained Tyrogue, who I named Jack. Normally I don't reset for stats, or even EV Train, but Tyrogue is an exception. I'm testing Hitmonchan, not Hitmonlee or Hitmontop. Luckily, I got a defense-boosting nature immediately, and after a few proteins I evolved him and added him to the team. Since Numb couldn't learn Waterfall for some reason, I boxed Tickle temporarily and ran through Victory Road with an HM user, Tentacool. Against Silver, the fight went cleanly. Squared one-shot Sneasel, Jack took out Golbat with Thunder Punch, Sweat handled Kadabra and Haunter despite Curse and Confusion. Numb finished his starter with Surf, and Sauna took out Magneton with Earthquake. I led with Sweat against Will. Feint Attack made quick work of both Zatus, and despite Reflect and Hypnosis attempts, Sweat pushed through. After some setup and chip damage, Executor went down as well. I switched to Squared for Jinx, which was an easy Flamethrower KO, and then brought in Tickle to finish Slowbro with Solar Beam. I led with Squared against Koga and set up a sunny day. Ariados went down quickly, and Fortress couldn't do anything through the sun-boosted flamethrowers. Muck was handled by Sauna with Earthquake, and his Crobat was kind of annoying. Double Team spam dragged the fight out, but eventually Numb's Zen Headbutt connected enough times to end it. I led with Numb against Bruno. Hitmontop immediately went for Dig, which meant my first 2 Zen Headbutts missed. Thankfully, Dig was doing basically no damage, and once it finally connected, Zen Headbutt put it down. Against Hitmonchan, things got messy. Thunder Punch paralyzed Numb, and I got hit with multiple full paralysis turns. After a full restore, though, Numb stabilized and took it out. Onyx went down easily to Surf, and Machamp looked threatening, until its revenge, that was boosted by losing the Onyx the previous turn, did basically nothing. One Zen Headbutt later, and it was gone. At this point, I was out of Zen Headbutt PP, so I switched to Tickle for Hitmonlee. That didn't go well. After taking multiple Blaze Kicks, including a crit, and not being able to do anything, Tickle went down. Squared came in to clean up, and after a few more flamethrowers, Bruno was finished. After healing up with full restores and max elixirs, I went into Karen's fight with a plan. With Never Melt Ice and Jack's ability Iron Fist, Ice Punch was practically a stab move. So I led with Jack against Karen. His Sky Uppercut took out Umbreon. His Ice Punch took out Murkrow. When her Gengar came out, I sent in Sweat to deal with it, and after it missed 2 Focus Blasts, it was over. Her Houndoom tried to set up with Nasty Plot, but Jack shut that down immediately. Vileplume was the only hiccup. Paralysis slowed things down, but an Ice Punch freeze sealed the fight. Karen gave her speech, and it was time for the champion battle against Lance. I adjusted items, giving Jack the Magnet and Sauna the Never Melt Ice, and went in. Gyarados went down to Thunder Punch after a short exchange. Charizard, however, took Jack out with Air Slash before he could get a hit off. Num came in and took out the Charizard, though. Then came the 3 Dragonites. The first one went down cleanly to Sauna's Avalanche after it missed a Dragon Rush. But I need to say something here. Physical ice moves in early generations are awful. Your best option is Avalanche, which has negative priority, meaning you often just get hit first and die, which is exactly what happened against the second Dragonite. Fire Blast took Sauna out before it could even move. From there, the fight got kind of desperate. Num got nearly one-shot by Outrage. Tickle came in to absorb hits but eventually failed. Squared tried to set up but couldn't survive after getting one flamethrower off. Eventually, Sweat came in and was able to take out the dragon. Between Paralysis, Sand Attack, and Tail Whip, I slowly dismantled Lance's final Dragonite, turning what should have been a sweep into a drawn-out but controlled win. After that, Num handled Aerodactyl and Lance was down. Normally, this would be where this experiment would end. But half of my team, Tangrowth, Mamoswine, and Hitmonchan, were all late-game additions, and I didn't feel like they had enough time to shine against the league. At the same time, I didn't want to grind all the way through Kanto just for the sake of it. So back when I was facing Whitney's gym, I put up a poll asking whether I should stop at Lance or push all the way to Red. By the time I beat Lance, 3 people had voted, and 2 of them said to push to Red. So democracy has spoken, and unfortunately for me, democracy is broken. So I spent the entire weekend going through Kanto instead of working on the next video. I started with Janine since she's the lowest level. Num handled Crobat despite Screech, Squared set up Sunny Day and swept most of the team. Weezing went down to Psychic. While exploring Mount Moon, I got jumped by Silver again. This fight went smoothly. Squared took out his Sneasel, Jack took out Golbat with Thunder Punch, Tickle nearly one-shot Alakazam, Num took down Typhlosion despite having a burn, Sweat cleaned up Gengar, and Sauna handled Magneton. Tickle finished the fight against Alakazam, closing out the battle. Against Brock, I led with Tickle and set up Sword Stance. After tanking a Rock Slide and missing the first Power Whip, things stabilized quickly. From there, Tickle just started tearing through the team. Graveler went down even after a Defense Curl, Kabutops and Omastar both fell to Power Whip, Onix and Rhyhorn also went down. Tickle ended the fight barely standing, but it was a clean sweep. Against Misty, the plan was simple. Let Jack Thunder Punch everything. The plan immediately fell apart. Golduck survived on 1 HP and disabled Thunder Punch, forcing me into Ice Punch, which did basically nothing. After some awkward switching between moves, Jack finally took it down. Quagsire and Lapras went down after a few sky uppercuts, but Lapras put up more of a fight than expected, leaving Jack low. I tried switching to Tickle for Starmie, which did not work. Tickle got taken out by an Ice Beam. Sweat came in and finished the fight with Feint Attack. Also, quick note, I completely skipped mentioning Surge earlier. That's because Sauna swept him so quickly that I barely had any notes. Sweat handled Sabrina almost entirely on its own. Espeon went down quickly. Alakazam set up Reflect but still fell after a few feint attacks. Mr. Mime tried to be clever with Light Screen and Mimic, both of which did absolutely nothing useful, and Sweat comfortably closed out the fight. I led Jack against Erica, holding the Nevermelt Ice. Jumpluff went down immediately, but the rest of the fight was a bit messy. Victreebel kept surviving on a sliver and healing all the way up. Leech Seed and Leaf Storm started wearing Jack down. Eventually Jack fell to her Blossom. Squared came in and cleaned up the rest with Flamethrower. While preparing for Blaine, I ran out of meaningful trainers. So instead, I used some minor deities to get some EXP from. I took out Articuno, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. They were all converted into experience. Unfortunately, it wasn't very much experience. Once I got leveled up for Blaine, I led with Numb and set up Amnesia as Blaine set up Sunny Day. Even with Poison and Burns, Numb just refused to go down. Magcargo did almost nothing, Magmar chipped but couldn't break through, Rapidash got close, but not close enough. Surf eventually cleaned through the entire team. I went into blue slightly underleveled because I did not feel like any more grinding against wild Pokemon that would not give me any EXP. I led with Squared and set up Sunny Day. Trick Room. Still, Flamethrower took out Exeggutor. From there, Tickle handled Rhydon, Sauna got one-shot by Arcanine, Numb took revenge with Surf, Machamp went down after some back and forth. Then came Pidgeot. Sweat couldn't quite break through due to healing, so I had to get stupid with switching, eventually sacrificing Tickle to get Jack in safely. From there, Thunder Punch cleaned up Pidgeot and Gyarados, ending the fight. After finishing Kanto, I spent the next day grinding gym leader rematches. I also took a break for Easter, spent time with my brother and his friend's in-laws, very much friend of a friend territory. I jammed my thumb while throwing a football because I am genuinely bad at everything I try to do, and because I couldn't hold the shotgun properly because my thumb was really fucked up, I watched everyone else shoot clay pigeons. Then I came back the next day to take on Red. My team was around level 70. Plan was just to test the waters. That is not what happened. I led with Sauna against Pikachu. His Iron Tail missed and Earthquake one-shot. It's a pretty good start. I switched to Tickle against Blastoise and immediately got taken out by a Blizzard. Sweat came in, landed a Screech, but took a Focus Blast for over half and then got finished by Blizzard. That was the only time Sweat had fainted in the entire run. If this was a Nuzlocke, he would have been the GOAT. So I sent in Jack. He tanked a Blizzard and took out Blastoise with Thunder Punch. Against Charizard, I switched to Numb. His Air Slash missed, and Surf brought it into the red. Red pivoted into Venusaur, and instead of switching, I stayed in, which cost me. Giga Drain brought Numb low, and I let it go down to get a safe switch. I did get decent damage off with Psychic, though. Squared came in, set up Sunny Day to remove Hail, and finished Venusaur. Then things started to spiral. Jack took most of Lapras's health before going down. Squared came back in, got Lapras into the red, and then fell. Now I was down to my last real option. I sent in Sauna. At this point, the state of Red's team was less than ideal. He had two Pokemon barely alive, and one left full health. I was not going to sit through another full day of grinding, so I made a decision. I used a max revive I had been holding on to the entire playthrough. Jack was back. Red full restored on his Lapras that same turn. I planned to revive Numb next, but misclicked and used Ancient Power instead, doing almost no damage, but somehow getting the Omni boost. Not exactly what I needed, but a little chip is useful. The next turn I max revived Numb, and Sauna went down. I sent Jack back in. Sky Uppercut and Psychic traded heavy damage, but I didn't want to risk a miss, so I went for Thunder Punch and finished Lapras. Numb came back in to deal with Charizard. Even after Red healed, I brought it back to the red, and after tanking an Air Slash, Charizard finally fell. Now it was just Snorlax. I left Numb in to get one last move off and used the opportunity to fully restore Jack in the back. Numb barely survived a hit on 4 HP, got off a surf for chip damage, and then went down. I sent in Jack. One final Sky Uppercut, and Snorlax went flying off the peak of Mount Silver. Over 10 levels under Red's team, and I still won. This is my longest test so far, and finally it was over. Now that I've finally finished both Johto and Kanto, it is time for the final rankings. Umbreon is an S tier. Even without strong Dark-type moves, it just didn't care. It took hits from everything, consistently won its matchups, and only fainted once during the red fight at the very end. It swept multiple gym leaders, handled problematic Pokemon, and was easily the most reliable member of the team. Slowbro is a solid A tier. It was consistently able to both take hits and dish them out, and outside of a slight dip right before evolution, it was reliable the entire run. Honestly, that dip just reflects good evolution pacing more than anything else. The only real downside is that it doesn't get Psychic until the post-game, but Zen Headbutt still did the job just fine. Hitmonchan earns A tier. Its biggest issue is availability. It comes extremely late, but even with that, it made a big impact. Its coverage with Ice and Thunder Punch let it fill roles that Tangrowth and Mamoswine struggled with, and it performed consistently well in the fights that it participated in. Ninetails lands in B tier. It always performed when I needed it to and had surprisingly good special bulk. But the issue is that fire just isn't that good of a type for Johto, especially if you don't have him for Bugsy. It only really shined against Janine, and even the Ice Gym isn't a great matchup because of all the water types. On top of that, it was hard to find good grinding spots late game where Ninetails wouldn't struggle. Mamoswine gets a B tier. It suffers heavily from the lack of strong physical ice moves. Your best option is Avalanche, which has negative priority, and that's a real problem. On top of that, its typing doesn't cover its weaknesses well, so it often got taken out before it could even act. That said, when it did get to attack, it hit hard. It performed very well against electric types and was one of the few Pokemon that could one-shot a member of Red's team. I really wanted Tangrowth to be better, but it's a C tier. Its physical bulk is great, but its special defense is so low that even neutral special hits were a problem. That became especially obvious against Misty and Red. It also comes in late, which hurts it even more. These are just my experiences with these Pokemon, and your experience may have been very different depending on the game or team you used. If you had a different run with them, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, and if you'd like to follow along as I work through the long process of ranking every Pokemon line, feel free to subscribe.